Today I'm going to be making 2 cards and sharing some tips along the way using stencils and coordinating dies. Welcome back. It's time for another Take 2 with Therese at Altenew, and I'm going to be making 2 cards today using the Hill Blossoms stencil set, and now it has a coordinating die set as well. It has 2 dies, including one that just cuts out the flowers and the other one which cuts out the whole bouquet, and I'm going to be using both of them today. So I'm going to start with the stenciling, and it's a 2-piece stencil set. The leaves are on one of the pieces and the flowers are on the other, and it's easy enough to tell which is the base color because that has a larger cutout portion on the stencil, and typically I would use my lighter color for this, and I'm blending it with the ink blending tool from Altenew. It's the large tool, and if you only have this tool, you can certainly use it for this project, but I will show you another tool in just a moment. The second color that I'm adding now is the darker green, which is the shadow color, and today I'm using the lime and then the fresh leaf. And it does add such a lot of dimension to these images, and they're a really quick and easy way to create some floral bouquets. And now that there's a coordinating die, you can do lots more techniques. So the flower stencil here has 4 different layers, and they're all on the same stencil, and you can line them up within the leaves. And I'm using the pink colors today, starting with the lightest one, which is Pink Diamond, and then Pinkalicious, and then Rubelite. And I just work my way through the colors, and I am masking off the edges of my stencil so I don't accidentally blend any ink where I don't want it. And if you're not sure about the layering and how to, it is on the packaging that comes with the stencils, but it's also at the Altenew blog, and you can find it by just heading to the product itself, and you'll find the links for any videos or guides right at the product. Okay, I did actually come in here with some milk chocolate for the center of my flowers. I have one of the detail blending brushes, and I haven't used these much yet. They are a very similar feel to the ink blending tools themselves, so I was really interested to see how they go. And for such a small area like the center of these flowers, I really didn't need to mask off any of the actual stencil itself. I could have easily just held it in place and come in with this blending brush and added the ink, and it was really easy to use, and I have used it a few times now, and I'm really liking these as well. And I do actually clean my stencil between changing colors just in case. Now for the second image here, I've only done the base layer, and you'll see why in just a moment. And then I also came in and recreated all the flowers again using exactly the same colors on a separate piece of cardstock. How pretty are these flowers? I think if you just used this stencil and covered a whole card base with this, that would just be beautiful. Alright, now I'm going to be using the bouquet die and die cutting the image that I've got fully completed. Now it's a very intricate die, and it cuts right up to the edge of the image. So what I've done is actually create a template by die cutting the bouquet out of a scrap piece of cardstock, and then I can hold it over top of my finished image and hold it in place with some low tack tape and run that through my die cutting machine, and it will cut exactly where I've laid the die over top. I'm going to quickly show you this again in a moment, so don't worry if you missed it. I have done this technique before. It's a great way to line up dies that are hard to see or work out. So I'm doing the same thing here with the flowers. I've made a template by just die cutting a piece of scrap cardstock first. Then I can hold it over place of the finished images, and I adhere the paper together, lay the die in place like a jigsaw puzzle piece, hold it in place with some tape, and then I can run it through my die cutting machine. That way I'm going to get the best possible cut, the closest cut that I can get. And it doesn't matter if you don't get it perfect, because you can always come in and add a little bit of ink around the edges with your detail tool. Sometimes I've also found that little bits of white cardstock can get left on the edges from the scrap piece that I had on top, so it does pay to check if they're actually little bits of white paper or if you did actually move the die. Alright, my first card I'm going to start assembling now. I have the Nesting Slim Rectangles die set, and this is one of the smaller rectangles. I'm going to be making, it's almost like a mini slimline card. Now the finished size for this is 2 3/4 by 6 3/4. So basically I just made a card base to fit that die cut, and I will make an envelope to fit that, or I'll give it as a gift card with a present. I'm layering up. I want to create a frame, so I've used one of the smaller rectangles to cut away and create my frame, and I also wanted to pop that up on the front of my card, so I did actually add about 3 or 4 layers of cardstock behind that to hold that up, and then I could just adhere that to my card front. I do temporarily tape my inside of my card together so it's not popping out all the time while I'm trying to create. And I also built up the inside rectangle that I created as well. So basically it's given me a popped up frame and an inner rectangle portion here to adhere my bouquet from the Hill Blossoms stencil and die. And that way I'm actually just using a liquid glue here to adhere it directly to the card front. And the sentiment today is from the Mini Delight Bold Bloom, and I popped that up just with a 1mm foam, so there's not much to mention other than on the card itself. And here I go, moving my sentiment around again, about 1mm to the left. It was worth it though, seriously. And I came in and added a few of the satin white sequins to both my cards today as well. Alright, so I want to show you another way to use these dies, and I want to create a popped up, partially cut image. So I've decided I want to cut away from the right side here of the bouquet, and I'm adhering my die in place, roughly working out where I want my cut to be. And what I like to do is actually put a cross on the piece of cardstock on the side that I want cut. That way I know I'm going to cut the right side, or the correct side. And I make a little tick mark on the back of my cardstock so that I know where I need to place my plate up to, because as I run this through my die cutting machine, the only bit that's going to cut is the piece where the two plates are touching. So it's really easy. If you just want to do a partial die cut, just use your normal die cutting sandwich for any thin wafer die, and then I can just use my paper trimmer, or if you've got a craft knife and a metal ruler you can do that as well. But I've got one of the paper trimmers with a guide wire, and I find this is really easy for this technique. I can just keep sort of glancing and trim it away, and then use my craft knife just to finish it off at the end. Now I've got a piece of navy cardstock again, and I'm adhering that to a top folding A2 card, and I've added a white heat embossed sentiment. It's from the Fancy Greetings stamp set, and I have popped up my partial die cut panel, and I want that at the top of the panel. When I say panel, I mean card. And then these are the little flowers that I created. I'm adding a glue dot behind the center of the flower and just sort of pushing up the edges a little bit so it adds a bit of dimension. And I didn't really need to add the pink layer of stenciling at the back, but I just think it added a little something, but you could certainly just add the flowers here if that's what you wanted to do. So don't forget to head to the blog if you want to see a full list of the supplies that I've used today. Thanks so much for joining me. Bye.